Welcome to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. It is time to make nutrition part of the conversation. I'm your host, Christina Veselak, and I'm so glad you're here. Did you know that it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully? But to do that, it needs to be fed optimally. Have you ever wondered why so many committed people relapse or maybe even die? Why so many people on psychotropic medication still feel lousy and still have cravings? What if the missing piece is food, the right food? What if the right nutrients like amino acids or even eating protein every 4 hours could actually balance your brain chemistry and your mood without medication and support lasting recovery? In this podcast, we explore the powerful connection between feeding your brain well, mental health, relapse, and recovery from addiction. We will share insights from experts, inspiring recovery stories, and practical strategies you can use today. Whether you're in recovery, a healthcare professional, or someone passionate about emotional well being, this show is for you. Let's dive in and discover how fueling your body and brain with the right food, the right amino acids, and other key nutrients can fuel your transformation today. Welcome to a new episode of Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. This is your opportunity to hear wonderful success stories of people's own personal recovery, practitioner stories, and ideas and concepts that you've probably not heard anywhere else about how feeding the brain what it needs to function optimally improves everybody's functioning. Those of us in recovery from addictive disorders, from mental health disorders, those of us with stressful family situations, and those of us just trying to live our best lives possible. Today's episode features Jeff Jones. Jeff is a great friend of mine. I met him in Colorado, probably going on 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And he became a student and learned wonderful things that he's been putting into practice um, with both people in recovery and their families. Jeff will be speaking at the upcoming conference in Columbus in a couple of months on using nutritional strategies with family members. This is actually one of my favorite topics. And the very first nutritional talk I ever gave back in 2007 was on nutritional support for family members. So, Jeff, welcome. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Christina. Yeah, so I am delighted to be on your podcast because really, when I met you and I started learning from you, it helped me to think differently about what I saw in
Yeah.
clients. And that was super helpful. So, my focus has been families for a good decade or so, mainly because I grew up in a family with addiction, not my mom and dad, but my mom's father. And it was just convoluted and confusing and mixed messages. And I never forgot it. And so well, actually, I started doing mediation, and attorneys would say, "Are you a psychologist?" And I was like, "No." And I started thinking, well, maybe I have something here. So I went to school to get a LPC, and that kind of started the journey. And then families and addiction was my focus, and trauma. And I just approached it like we would traditionally until I started learning from you, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's way more going on here.
And there is way more going on, especially with family members, isn't there?
It's the living with addiction is continued stress, and it increases the baseline of the nervous system activation. And when
Mhm.
that happens, any human body will have more blood flow to the limbic or amygdala, the fire alarm part of the brain, and we're going to be more reactive. Exactly. And so, calming strategies for family members is super important. And calming strategies, there's so many of them, but there's a lot of them that are nutritional strategies.
Mhm.
The serotonin system, the GABA system, it can be some herbs, things to sleep better. But I didn't just read this in a book, but when people sleep better, their brain works better.
Sure they do. And
And
their mood stabilize.
yeah, it's like pre- on some level, it's pretty obvious, but on another level, this whole thing with families, um, it's like they have been shamed. The whole language that I grew up to understand, it didn't really fit my family, and I I totally saw when I worked in treatment centers and with my own clients that they didn't really recognize their own stress, or it was more like they saw the stress and their only strategy to relieve their stress was to try to get their loved one to make better choices, and their loved one is in addiction, and the brain's impaired, and so it's not making its best choices, obviously. So I kind of approach this whole thing with families where once families see this larger pattern of what's going on, and they can see the impersonal aspects to it,
Right. That's right.
and they can start calming themselves regardless of how they do it, and there's many different ways. When they can start calming themselves, then naturally they are going to do much better at not falling into traps that addiction can set for them.
Well, exactly. I think a lot of people don't realize that stress depletes our brain of our mood mediating neurotransmitters and strips our body of all the nutrients needed to make more of these neurotransmitters.
Yeah,
So,
it's like your eating protein saves lives website. It's like when I eat protein on a regular basis, on some level that's pretty easy, but when I'm all stressed out, I can forget. I can forget, and I know. So it's like I should be able to remember, but when my body is activated, it's going to be easier for me to forget. So it's all about establishing habits, routines, structure.
habits, routine, structure, and support so that we are consistently reminded that when we feed our brain what it needs to function optimally, it does. And as you said, people under extreme stress, we're using up our neurotransmitters in great big gobs, we're depleted. There, we don't have the wherewithal to feed ourselves. We're running in sympathetic arousal. The prefrontal cortex, the part that allows us to slow down,
Yep,
plan, make shopping happen, make cooking happen, make digestion happen.
right.
This isn't happening. And so we don't shop, we don't cook, we don't eat, we grab this and we grab that. And now
Yeah,
we're in this downward spiral. Our brain is getting more and more depleted, more and more starving. We're more and more engaging in behavior that deplete our neurotransmitters even
yep,
more.
yep,
And then people get mad at us for behaving rigidly and being stressed and being angry and being anxious and being controlling and being perfectionistic
Yes.
and being
Yes.
exhausted and. But these symptoms of what we call codependency are
Yes.
purely unadulterated symptoms of neurotransmitter depletion.
Yeah, that's reinforced over and over by stress, living with addiction, and all the chaotic kinds of unexpected things that can happen.
That's right. And a lot of people will have be hearing what you and I are talking about right now, Jeff, for the first time,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the very, very first time, because this relationship between stress and depleted brain chemistry and what we need to do to feed our brain has just never, ever been part of the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like the adrenals can start to get worn out over years. And when the adrenals get worn out, our GI system isn't functioning properly. And, we can have all kinds of internal
And our blood
problems,
sugar,
our blood sugar. And there's so much research with this. And, you know, Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, comes at it from one angle. It doesn't really include the nutritional support and interventions that I learned from you, but there's so much research that if this stress kind of continues year after year after year and the adrenals get worn down, it's I mean people die earlier. I mean family members can
family
die
members,
earlier.
they do, and they get all these stress-related illnesses like cancer and heart disease and back pain and stomach pain and headaches and. And I don't so much like using the language of the adrenals being worn down, as much
Okay.
as the adrenals down-regulate themselves.
Down
You know,
regulate.
right. They are like being asked to keep on putting out and putting out and putting out. And just like when we keep on putting out neurotransmitters in response to drug use, tolerance builds and you need more and more drug to get the same effect because the brain
Right.
down regulates. The brain says, "Oh, I'm putting out way too much. Let's slow things down." Well, our adrenals do the same thing. They say,
Right.
"Oh, I'm putting up so much cortisol. I'm having to
Right.
step up so much. Let's calm things down. Let's slow some things down here." And what it feels like is that our adrenals are worn out and we're in adrenal fatigue because
Right.
that's what it feels like in our own personal experience. Like, I'm done. My
Yeah.
adrenals are done. I'm done. No more. Let's go sleep for a year under the bed or in a dark cave somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and the body, the nervous system can go into freeze and then have all the
That
what
too.
you just said collapse. I'm
Right.
done. The sun's not going to come up tomorrow. I might as well just give up. And it's all the, believing those shaming messages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you work with families, Jeff? If like a family member
So,
comes to you and they're in
yeah.
this, in this
Yeah.
sympathetic arousal.
So I no longer am doing therapy. I'm doing coaching. So
Mm-hmm.
it starts with education and having families kind of understand this larger picture that we're talking about and the impersonal aspects of it. And so that is a first invitation. It's ideally it'd be to the whole family, the reality of it starts with one person. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're listening to this, it can start with you. And the more you do this, then you can be the calmest nervous system in the room.
That's
And then everyone else, the academic lingo there is co regulate off of your calm nervous system. And yeah, so there's like an educational pathway that I take people through, but if they do not get a good handle on this ability to calm themselves, and I guess it really starts with they need to recognize what's happening in their body first
Mhm.
and then be able to calm themselves. But once they do that, you know, they can kind of their changes in their family, and changes could be just not being so reactive and
That's right.
impulsive. And so their changes can ripple out to other people in the family. And of course, there's a lot of education that comes along here. But if this first part isn't really um, handled well, if people aren't willing to recognize the activation, calm themselves with any number of strategies, and the
Well, let
nutrition.
me
Yeah,
let me jump in here just for a
please.
sec, Jeff, because I've been a therapist for a very, very long time. And I know all of the strategies to teach my clients how to calm themselves, you know, how to change what you say to yourself, how to breathe, how to relax, all
Yes.
of that
Okay.
stuff, right? But
Sure.
while your neurotransmitters are very depleted, there's absolutely no way
Right.
people can utilize those skills. And they
Sure.
try to. They want to be very obedient. They want to do what you tell them to do, and they try,
Yeah.
and then they fail, and then they feel like failures.
Yeah.
And then they're
So
embarrassed and don't want to tell you that it's not working. So this is why I like starting people with the calming amino acids, with the 5-HTP, with the tryptophan, with the GABA, with the theanine to support the brain so that the nervous system now has the resources to pull
right.
from and the person can all of a sudden relax. I spoke with a gentleman this morning who has had severe anxiety and depression his whole life, and nothing has really worked, and he's gotten addicted to all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
I gave him 1,500 milligrams of tryptophan, and for the first time in his life,
Yeah.
was able to relax.
Yeah. And that's a game changer because for people who aren't familiar with that experience, they may believe that it's not even possible.
Or know what relax even feels like.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the language I use is that people can enable health, and they can do that with like a deliberate daily life cycle structure kind of thing, and they can track it, and they can have their own program. And if this is the mom, they can start kind of making food differently, feeding
Mm,
their family differently. And, because they're going to be eating differently. And when
that's
they
right.
start enabling health, they are less enabling old patterns that reinforce addiction.
That's right. That's right. They're feeling better. They're able to model um, better behavior, better reactions, but they're also able to model self-care and
Absolutely.
support their family members in improved self-care, right? And of course,
Yeah,
self-care includes eating, getting that 20 grams of protein in every 4 hours along with
right.
other real food. It includes
S-
using the amino acids on a regular basis,
Yeah.
getting to
So,
bed at a regular time.
so my whole reason for starting with families is that it's like the statistics are still about plus or minus 300 people every day die from an addiction related cause. Families are on the front line of this stuff. And I actually believe, and I mean, it's just common sense that if families can start to see this pattern and calm themselves down, and other people in the family can co regulate off of them, they can be, they can change these statistics nationally. Like, yeah, that's a big old ask. That's a big old grandiose vision. But I really see where families, there's so much potential, untapped potential. So it's
That's right.
almost like a grassroots kind of new understanding or new movement. And it's like in the 80s, the late 80s, when anonymous people came out and people in recovery started speaking and telling their story. I really see the possibility for family members to be telling their story too.
That's right.
Because this is important. They're on the front lines, and I believe that they are the very first ones that can make change. And why not start sooner rather than later? And so oftentimes with addiction, it's like things need to get pretty severe before, they reach out for help, whether it's the individual or the family.
That's right. And very often the family member is the first person to reach out for help because of these stress related physical issues, whether they be headaches or tummy aches or backaches or, more severe things.
And I mean, I think some family members don't even connect the dots
No,
that
they don't.
their stomach ache is about the stress they've been living with.
That's
Yeah.
right. And unfortunately, the practitioners don't ask.
That is so right on, Christina. That is so right on. And it's like, why do they not ask? Well, they're trained to just look at the biggest problem or
Right,
something.
the tiny little
I
symptom, and then what medication can I use to fix this symptom, rather than what's the context that
Yeah,
this symptom
yes,
is occurring in, and
yes,
what's the bigger picture, and what's the bigger intervention that needs to take place here.
sure. So that's what I'm going to talk about at this conference that you're
Hmm.
putting on. And I'm super excited to be able to do this because I really see that, and there's so many practitioners that you've trained, and when they start to kind of expand their perspective, which you've expanded their perspective with this whole biochemical leg of the stool, the food, the nutrients, the aminos, and so I think this is a beautiful group of people to be able to deliver this message of, hey, these same ways, these same tools can be used for family members as well. And when they start a program like the deliberate daily life cycle, which includes food, nutraceuticals, it's like that can ripple out into their family.
Yes, it sure can.
So and that I think if people just get that, that is a huge thing. And in the program that I have, family addiction engagement training, then it gets into having new conversations about a new perspective of recovery. And that new perspective of recovery includes everything I've learned from you. Like,
Mm,
I mean, changing our food, the nutraceuticals as a first line of defense, because nutraceuticals are non toxic and non addictive. And the whole pharmaceuticals, which some people may need, but that can be like a second line of defense. At least that's the
That's right.
way I see it.
That's right. After you feed the brain what it needs to function optimally, let's see what's left over. Some brains
Yeah,
need a little more support than other brains. So, Jeff, how can people reach you? We'll have all this information in the show notes, but
sure.
how can
Thank you.
people re- find you, reach out to you, get information?
Yeah, the easiest way to do that would be on my website, thefamilyrecoverysolution.com.
Okay.
And my emails on there and stuff like that. The blogs on there are a bunch of Substack articles and some other articles that I wrote many years ago. And yeah, that would probably be the first place.
Wonderful. Well, everybody, I hope that you do check out Jeff's website. He's got some wonderful articles on there and this game-changing approach to working with families. Jeff, thank you for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you in Columbus.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. I'm Christina Veselak, your host, and I hope today's episode has inspired and equipped you with new insights and tools to support your recovery journey or practice. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who could benefit from the knowledge shared here. Stay connected with us for more episodes filled with practical advice, expert wisdom, and inspiring recovery stories. Remember, nutrition is a powerful tool in mental health and relapse prevention. Power up your recovery today. I'm Christina Veselak, and I'll see you next time.